This video was made possible by the EA Creator Network and was captured on a work-in-progress build. What's going on, everybody? My name is C4. Thank you for clicking on the video, and today we are going to be showing every single tip and trick I know to give you the biggest advantage possible when it comes to recruiting in college football 26. These are universal recruiting tips, so whether you're at a 1-star school or a 5-star school, let's just call this video $100 million in NIL advantage. That is what I'm going to give you with these tips and tricks to dominate, be it an offline dynasty where you're preparing for maybe even a cupcake squad or rebuilding like my personal Florida Gators and bringing a team back to its glory years, or if you're in a multi-user franchise, you are going to dominate with the tips I'm about to share. Now, two very quick things at the very beginning. I do have a video that is either out or is coming out that's breaking down all the changes, the sick changes, to the college football 26 transfer portal to give you an advantage there. And I also have a breakdown of the best recruiting head coach build that you can get in college football 26. That is a build that I wish I had at this point. Unfortunately, old Billy Napier is actually not brutal from a starting point for a recruiter, but certainly not meta. So if you want to have the biggest advantage possible and kind of map out your coach unlock journey, because you know, much like in college football 25, here in college football 26, there is no refunding points. It is all or nothing. You have to commit to whatever path you go down for your coach ability skill tree. So check out that video to make sure you don't misspend your points on needless attributes that you don't need to help with the ultimate recruiting build. I got you hooked up. Go check it out. Now, I'm not going to necessarily hold your hand throughout this whole video. This is not a for beginners guide, but I'm also going to try my best to explain things just in case you are a beginner or somebody that's always kind of found the recruiting process in last year's game maybe a little challenging, maybe a little overwhelming. Don't worry, Papa C4 is going to hold your hand. We're going to navigate this together, and you are going to be golden by the end of today's video. The big change you're going to notice right away is at the top of your recruiting board, you now have your team needs listed, which is very helpful, but especially for me, when I initially saw this, I was like, oh my God, what is the state of this roster? I need every single bit. I need 5 guards. The fact of the matter is, this isn't necessarily all the team needs that you have to go get. It's just strong suggestions, if you will. So while the team needs gives you a good idea, and it can give you a basis when you're just firing through your board and trying to get your initial, like, these are the kind of positions we should pay attention to, but it said I needed 2 quarterbacks, when the reality is I'm losing 2 quarterbacks, 2 seniors in Harrison Bailey and Clay Millen, but I don't necessarily have to recruit 2 quarterbacks during this cycle because I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure DJ Lagway doesn't transfer, and we got Jones and Warner who are going to be on the roster for another season for, like, position minimums. Like, don't act like the team needs are to meet position minimums. It's just kind of showing you your outgoing talent and giving you an idea where you should potentially look position-wise when you're building your board. So in my opinion, I don't like to start by just going strictly off recommended. I like giving myself the best chance humanly possible to get these players locked in fast as possible, and I think that is starting with your pipelines. An even better starting point is with the state that your team resides in. So for us right now, as the University of Florida, I want to look at what kind of players we're dealing with from the state of Florida. Like, honestly, if I can get a juicy number here of targets, like I'm looking for a dozen there or so, if I can get them all from the state of Florida, that is my top priority. And then I would look down to secondary needs, and I would flush this out just from looking at players in the state of Florida and look at them across all of our big pipelines, where we have Georgia as a silver 2, we have Maryland, I believe that is, as a silver 2. We have Texas as a silver 2. Louisiana as a silver 2. Alabama as a gold 3. We have Pennsylvania as a silver 2. So some outstanding. We got Virginia there as well, but some outstanding pipelines that we're working with here in Florida. And obviously it's going to look a little bit different when you are a 1- or 2-star school, but still the rule of thumb is the same. Always first, build your board off the best available players in your top pipeline. Now during this preseason phase, you know, a rule of thumb in determining from a small school to a big school, I think when you are a little bit bigger school like we are here at Florida, you have a little bit more leeway to cast a wide net for your prospects and how many players you want to target. I think the same rule of thumb, though, between a big school and a small school during this initial preseason stage is cast a wide net and as big of a net as your hours will allow you to scout. Now, you don't have to 100% scout every single player. I have a little hack that can help you out a little bit when it comes to scouting and understanding if a player is good or not. But I think for the rule of thumb is, these points that you have, these hours that you have in the preseason, they do not carry over into the regular season. I have 1,000 points to maximize during this initial recruiting phase. You're going to want to spend them all. So you need to make sure you have at least 5 hours per player to offer them a scholarship. That is a bare minimum, but everything else, scout it away. Now, scouting is pretty much the same as it was last year. There are a couple changes that you can use the information from your scouting a little bit differently. I just kind of want to scout here until we find a bust. Well, we got Edward Doyle, a nice little gem there. We got Rawlings. Now, I would say when you're on a limited budget, if you find a gem right away at a position, like in this case, if I was like a 3-star school and I only had 350, 400 hours total, I would almost just go and peck it right. As soon as I would find a gem, I'd be like, I'd almost commit to that guy. Be like, all right, this is where we're going to invest. I'm going to save the points and not focus scout, 10, 20, 30, 60, depending on how much boost you have across your recruiting tree, be it your head coach and your OC and DC. You can save a lot of points and just cash out and roll the dice on your gem. And I think that is something and a risk you need to take when you're a smaller school with a limited budget. But because we have a little bit more pull right now, let's kind of open it up a little bit. This is the only time I'm ever going to say I'm looking for a bust here because, as you may know, there is a huge change to how player development works in college football 26. In college football 25, if this was you looking at running backs, you're like, Doyle 100% is my guy, and I'm getting Edward Traore right off the board. But I don't want to say necessarily it's my favorite change or it's the biggest change, but the rule of thumb was when you would get a bust, it meant and was kind of exposing that the depth trait was not going to be great. And when you get a guy that was a gem, you would almost always have high expectations that the depth trait's going to be good. Like if I got Edward Doyle, a 4-star, top 100 player, almost top 5 in his position, gem, my expectation, and then sometimes you could get like an impact, but my expectation was he's going to be a star or an elite dev. And then when you would get a player, and sometimes busts would have good physical attributes or mentals that you like, but when you get a bust, you knew that guy was going to be like, maybe you'd get lucky and have impact dev, but he likely was going to be a normal dev. Get that guy off your board immediately. But in college football 26, dev trait progression is a thing. In the offseason, if a player meets certain thresholds, plays at a certain high level, gets a certain amount of awards, very similar to Madden, they will get rewarded with dev trait increases. So, unfortunately, in Traore's case, there's not a whole lot that can make me look past the bust, but there's going to be players that you might say, okay, for example, speed kills at running back. Let's say, in comparison, you have a Jabo here who has 87 speed, 88 acceleration. Not the style that you're looking for. But let's just say, hypothetically, Traore, scouted as a bust, had 93 speed, 94 acceleration. He was easily the fastest running back. In last year's game, it still didn't really matter. He was a bust, get him off your board. But in this year's game, because you have dev trait progression, I almost think, go with the attributes. Not every case, because there's absolutely going to be a better shot that Doyle, for example, could be an elite dev. Whereas Traore as a bust 100% will not be an elite dev. But there's going to be situations, again, even in the case of Doyle. Gem, great. Still doesn't necessarily have the speed attributes that I'm looking for. So again, if Traore was far and away stylistically, attribute-wise, the running back that you're looking for, it is not a death sentence anymore because it's a bust because you have the dev trait progression. So regardless of the fact that I'm Florida or if I was using a 1-star program, every tip I'm going to give you in this video is going to be applicable to any dynasty that you use. This one here, because I am Florida, I have 720 hours left. I am likely going to be able to fully scout every single player left on my board and still have more than enough budget to offer everybody that I want to keep a scholarship. But if you are a smaller program, you probably have half as many hours as I'm working with Florida. So you are going to have to pick and choose. You're probably not going to have the budget to 100% scout every single player and find out if they're gems or not. That is the value in scouting these players at this point 100% because you can get that little bit of information of whether or not they're a gem or bust. However, as I just explained, it's not as much of a personal deal breaker, not a deal breaker in game, but like for you to decide like, oh, there's going to be no good dev trait on a bust because of the dynamic dev traits that exist in college football 26. But another clutch move for when you're operating on a low budget, you can't fully scout everybody, but you want to know what kind of player you're dealing with. Go to my school and then look at playing time. and every player that you have on your board is going to have a letter grade. So we have Kute here, who's a C+ grade as far as playing time is concerned. Now, playing time is going to be what that recruit's overall is as a player right now, what they'll be as a freshman in comparison to what you have on the roster right now. Because we have an absolute beast in DJ Lagway, you know, honestly, a C+ is not too bad. But when you're on like a smaller school program, you're going to have players that have B+, A-, A+, A+ in playing time grade. And when you see that, you know that they're going to be a higher overall or a very good overall in comparison to what you have on a roster. And what I found more often than not in college football 25 was anything A and above, you are getting a better, higher overall out of that player as a true freshman than what you were going to have on your roster. And a great tool for how you can use this to like min-max. Again, you're not getting the full scouting. You're not finding out whether a player's a gem. You're not getting their speed. But say I only have a limited budget to get one wide receiver, but I have no points available to fully scout them. I can look at this, and based off of that, Emerson is going to have better overalls as a freshman than Bodwood, so let's remove him off our board. And then every now and again, even at a big school like Florida, you're going to find a player that is an A+ for playing time grade here in Williams at center, so that says 100% that needs to be a top-tier player that we go after. And again, another great example here at Mike linebacker. If I had 4 targets, and I only had enough for 3, one of them, just using this with 0 scouting, is going to stick out like a sore thumb. Now, there's always a chance that, for example, McGuire could have elite dev trait, whereas Gage, Brent, Pike could be busts that I don't scout that have normal dev trait. But when you're working with a limited budget, this gives you more than enough information to make an informed decision on how to refine your recruiting board to make the cuts, who to keep, who to scrap. Now, the thing about notes that I want to mention that we're not overly experiencing here, but we're going to in hindsight, is you also need to know when you got to give up on a player. So we are casting, 15 is still a large number of targets in my opinion. You'd absolutely, if you want to min-max and tinker with this every single week and fully lock in, by all means. But in my personal opinion, I like close to a dozen for my initial recruiting. 15 with a bigger school. I think when you're a smaller school, I would target 8 to 10, you know, if you're a 1 or 2 star. 15's kind of on the max end, but I think for a lot of these cases, we're feeling pretty good. But I think when you look at someone here like Cole Slay, for example, we are going to be fighting for our lives because these are some of the top players in the nation to keep for these number 1 interests, us, the Florida Gators, as the number 1 interest. So to do so, you can't just completely sleep on it. You can't rest on your laurels that you're the number 1 school in preseason because on any given week, things could take a drastic change. So when I start looking at mock, love them. 5-star, gem. We have Williams, who were 5th in. We have Potts, who were 2nd. Second, you know, first, second's not too bad. But when you start to get to 3rd, where we have Emerson, the athlete, as number 3. We have Brent, the 5-star gem linebacker, at 3rd. We have Slay as a 4th. It is going to be tough because look at the schools we're competing against. We got Penn State, Alabama, Georgia. We got Georgia, Alabama. We got Georgia, Alabama. You know, it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to give these guys the attention they need while maintaining such a sizable board. So I almost think this is a great stage because I feel like at 15. 15's a nice number, but I have a couple too many players that I'm not, you know, we're not locked in. And the schools that we're going to be competing with are other, you know, top pipeline tier schools. I wouldn't get rid of them yet because I think once you go from preseason to week 1, that's going to kind of give you the tail of the tape of whether or not they're going to be a long shot, and you should probably whittle them off your board and focus on guys that might be a little bit more realistic. But right now, we got 15 players. We're going to offer them all scholarships. Now is the perfect time. Make sure you offer a scholarship at this stage if you're interested in a player. I've, unfortunately, many a time forgot to do so, and it absolutely screws up your board once you get into the regular season. The last little thing you can use to aid your recruiting cycle is, and this kind of also depends on how and what strategy you set on for how you want to invest your hours in a recruiting cycle, but I would suggest within the first like 6 to 8 weeks, as many games that you can flex to a home game. That's just going to give you that much more opportunities to get these guys in for visits when they're ready. And you want the sooner visits as humanly possible because the later you wait for visits, the likelihood that's just going to be a waste of your recruiting hours because they're going to commit to somewhere else. Something you'll notice right away from going from preseason to week one is we've actually lost some ground on some of these players, like Doyle at running back got a huge boost to the U. They came out of absolutely nowhere. We've somehow fallen behind Central Florida. Gee, so like deal breakers have a lot more impact. I do think look, but you have an example here with Rudy Anderson because we gave him the scholarship. We got 4 influence points. So different strokes for different folks. But you wouldn't see this in college football 25. For the most part, you are only gain ground on prospects from offering them the scholarships and doing your homework from preseason to simulating to week one, where it's definitely got a lot more difficult. The right kind of difficult. I don't want to scare you guys off and make it seem like, college football 25 recruiting was playing on rookie and college 26 recruiting is playing on Heisman, but it's the right kind of increase in difficulty, which represents a more realistic recruiting process where in real life, like things like this happen. Where like for no fault of my own, why did my scholarship just get 1 influence here and tank me down a whole bunch of spots? Why did my scholarship here for Doyle give me 1 and then take me down below freaking Central Florida versus Emerson, where it hits me with the 4-star, which is awesome because he's a 5-star recruit and a top 10 player in the nation. But you know what I'm saying? That variance, that little bit of potential, like RNG, however you want to break it down, I think that is a welcome addition to college football 26 recruiting. Now, I'm going to get the camera out of the way here just so you guys get the full picture. Because I'm Florida, falling down to 4th for Doyle is not a death sentence. We still only in top 8. It's early enough. But to kind of make it more universally applicable and to go back to my point of kind of giving up on long shots, going maybe for quality over quantity, 15 still a little high. And if you are a smaller school and you just fell out of nowhere from, where were we with Doyle? We are his number 1 school or number 2 school in preseason, down to 4. That would absolutely be, even with the gem, I'm not in love with his base stats because we 100% recruit him. The only thing I like about him is the fact that he's a gem. He is a perfect candidate to kind of refine the list a little bit and just dump him. Because in a perfect world, for this circumstance, like if I'm recruiting Florida, what I would do in a rebuild is I have 800 hours, which means the strategy of sending the house, which is the max that I can apply to a player of 50, I have a board limit of up to 16 that I can hit every single player with send the house. You want a little bit of wiggle room. You want to be able to send the house in a perfect world and then still have some budget to do visits when you want. If that's an approach that you want to have to your recruiting cycle, you like to have a little bit of flex points here or there to maybe go back into the pool. Say if that running back that I just dumped off, we still needed a running back. He was the only guy. I decided it was too much of a long shot. Having a little bit of hours to work with to go back into the prospect list and try to find another running back, ideally like a 4-star that could take the place. It's still very early, so you're not going to be losing any ground. I could absolutely come back in at someone like Rollins, who we're still his number 2 school. We have the top pipeline and go chase him after. So it's always good having a little bit of wiggle room, but we're in a very good situation right now with the University of Florida that I'm going to be able to hit every single player with the strategy that I kind of found was tried, tested, and true in college football 26, which is sending the house and going to hard sell as fast as you can. So now we have all 14 of our targets on hard sell. This is a luxury that you're not going to have when you're a small school. I would suggest if you're doing this as a smaller school, you absolutely, for peace of mind, I wouldn't have 14, 15 targets. If I say only had a 450 to 500 hour budget, I'd be looking at around 10. The creme de la creme, your gems, your 4-stars, you're probably not going to be dealing with any 5-stars. Those are the guys I would send the house. Other than that, I would look at just where you stand in the influence. If you are, for example, where we're at with Williams here, got a little bit of a gainer there, you probably could go with 25. You could probably even hit him with 10, 15 for the time being. But prioritize gems above all as your 50. Even with the dev trait progression, dynamic dev traits, gems are still gems. So we're looking healthy. Because we're able to have the luxury to send the house, that took a lot of these players that, some of these guys we were 3rd, 4th, 5th. Other schools just don't have that budget to operate. So again, it is kind of a luxury based on the fact that we're rebuilding Florida. But the same type of approach of just, going quality over quantity as a smaller school, hitting your top players with 50, hitting your secondary players with 25 and 15, you are going to be able to make these meaningful jumps. Just kind of downscale it from 5 and 4 stars to your 4 and 3 stars. And or 3-star gems and 3-star normals. Now, one of the quality of life improvements to the recruiting board, one of the many quality of life improvements, is you now get the notification when you can take things to the next step with recruiting. As you can see, Tobias Robert does not have a notification. I cannot schedule a visit. I cannot sway, soft sell, or hard sell, but I do have it for Kute, and we're going to use him as the example here. So the meta last year, which still holds true in college football 26, when you have the budget, send the house, and then as fast as you possibly can by sending the house, hard sell if it makes sense. So a hard sell in this situation costs 40 hours. So what we're going to do is you would get rid of send the house because you can only have 50 on this player, and you would then go into hard sell. Now, a little bit of a tip and trick you might not have known. For hard sell, as you can see right here, just by going into college experience, it is going to give you 3 of these motivations. You have to pick the best 3 that line up with that player's information. You may look at Kute's like, well, I don't know if I'm ready to hard sell him because I only have 2 of the things he knows. There's still one outlier there, but do this trick. Depending on the grades that you've unlocked, be it check marks or red X's, you could sometimes get it with only 1 check mark. You could almost always get it with 2 check marks. You might be saying, again, I can't hard sell him. I don't have 3 check marks. I don't want to mess him up. He's a can't miss player. But with this too, you can go here knowing that conference prestige is an A+, and proximity to home is an A+. That conference legend is going to be his perfect pitch. Because, as you can see, it highlights conference prestige, it highlights proximity to home, and then it shows you that championship contender A+ is going to be, if you kept waiting and didn't want to hard sell him at this stage, going to be the 3rd piece of the perfect pick. So there is no other combination that works with conference prestige and proximity to home. So feel with absolute full confidence that this is the perfect hard sell to get the maximum amount of pitch performance for Connor Kute. Now, metas, yeah, you know, depending on what kind of game you play, like first-person shooter stuff, sometimes people get bored of meta. Sometimes people just want to have a little bit of fun. I still think this is going to be the meta way for recruiting. Now, obviously, budgets are going to be different. You're not going to be able to 100% right away, depending on the team that you use for your dynasty, hit them with the send the house hard sell approach. But what they did to make things a little more interesting is the change in schedule visit. Last year's schedule visit was universally 40 hours. And there was just no real way, unless you were a super small school, I think, to justify scheduling a visit for 40 hours when you could do this approach of hitting a hard sell for 40 hours. Get that influence now versus, you know, this is because we're really early in the season, but a lot of times when you schedule a visit, it was week 8, week 9, week 10. And by the time that your player, for those 40 hours on that scheduled visit, would have to sit and wait to come to your school to get that boost, they could be going to other schools. All those other schools could be hitting with hard sells and getting that influence right away. And a lot of times you'd be sitting and waiting and watching this player get just swept away by other schools. Other schools, NIL, the absolute Brinks truck, backing up and stealing these guys away for you. So more often than not, the visits in college football 25 at 40 hours universally, just, it never made sense. They definitely kind of realized this. They realized that the meta was to send the house and then eventually just kind of work through sway and hard sell. So what they did is introduced kind of variables to how much visits cost in college football 26. Actually, just quickly before we move on to the visit change, here's a perfect example of being able to hard sell without having any check marks, because for Tobias Robert, the only option that does not have a red X, even though I don't have any greens, is going to be grassroots traditionalist to get all the A's. So again, just because you might not have all 3 check marks to hit them with the for sure 100% confidence hard sell, the game still gives you more than enough information to make the right decision as early as possible. Week 5 is when things start rolling in. We already got a commit here in Connor Kute at quarterback. No visit needed. So this is kind of maybe just more so proof that the old meta in college football 25 of sending the house and hard recruiting works out. But there's also just certain situations, especially when you're dealing with the big dogs, you're dealing with the top end recruits, that there are just other schools that are in the same, you know, side of the food chain as you. It's very hard to compete with the Georgias, Alabamas of the world, obviously. So back to the schedule visit change. Last year, across the board, universally, 40 hours to bring someone in for a visit. A lot of times, you're wasting that 40 hours. This year in college football 26, they must have the data that no one was really utilizing visits the way they wanted to. They have a new feature called location-based recruiting. For players that have a higher proximity to our home grade, So, obviously, Clearwater, Florida. We're going to be able to get this guy, Lionel Potts, whenever we want to bring him on a visit for only 10 hours. The 10 hours is a nothing investment. It is the exact same as bringing, DMing a player for 3 influence gains, where on the right week, plus you can get the complimentary visits. We bring them in Texas. You bring in the right kind of compliments. That 10 hours is going to actually require and offer a lot more value than the 10 hours of DMing a player. So it is kind of situationally based, but you have someone like Potts here who's only going to cost 10. Now, there is the opposite side of that, where I just went out and found Kevin Rolland, who is from Pennsylvania. Now, it's still cheaper than the 40 hours, but it's going to cost us 25 hours versus the 10 to bring him into a visit because of that location-based recruiting. So I still think it is a much-needed quality of life to make scheduling visits a little bit more intriguing to do, especially if you want to maybe go a little off-meta. I don't necessarily know, unless a perfect storm arrives, where again you can queue up the right amount of complimentary visits, and you have a lot of confidence that you can bring in players for weeks that, again, like this Georgia week. If you know that you're gonna belt to what Georgia, you can queue up here. If these players are still undecided by week 10, again, that's kind of where the downside comes in on scheduling a visit, because by the time you get to week 10, where is this 5-star gem, top 5 player? He's probably already going to be figuring out where he wants to go. But in the right circumstance, scheduling visits in College Football 26 makes a whole lot more sense, and it's a whole lot worth the investment than what it was when it was a flat 40-hour rate in College Football 25. So a good quality of life improvement there. Oh, there we go, baby. First 5-star Rudy Amberson. He knows what's up. As you can tell, the names are still... I haven't seen them be as egregious as they were in 25. And hey, that's a sick name. Coco Gatchkar. But there still are some pretty wild names that get generated for prospects in College Football 26. Perfect timing. Another new addition to the world of recruiting in College Football 26 is the recruiting battle. We're looking at Joey Bullock right here, and it's down to us and the U. Now, don't really have much of an opportunity here to change out anything, unfortunately, which kind of stinks. But we still have an opportunity to bring him in on a visit. So we're going to trust that we can beat the #1 ranked Longhorns here, get the 2 influence. We will go to Conference Prestige. You want to play in the SEC, where the big boys play. Also helps, and again, here's like a perfect example of the inverse of why visits are still going to have a downside, because if I'm doing this as Miami, right, and I'm looking at the inverse of this, where it is a recruiting battle, and I'm going up against Florida, and Florida got him in on a visit on week 6, and I got to wait until week 11. There's just no way that his commitment, even with this recruiting battle, it's not going to delay it a whole lot. Like, the whole purpose of a recruiting battle is that the recruit won't commit right away, and instead they will set new higher commitment threshold, giving both schools a short window to make that one final push. It's not a long time of, it doesn't increase the amount of recruiting time by that much. It's just enough to create a space for a true head-to-head finish. From that point on, it becomes a race. Whichever school reaches the new commitment threshold first secures the commitment. And I think a huge factor for us right now is we got him in at a week 6 visit versus a week 11 visit. I'll be shocked if we don't get him. I think another time that I would value visits is, like, we got 335 hours remaining. Again, luxury because we're doing this as a bigger school. But when I'm looking, like, we still have Tobias Robert here, I'm a little worried that Florida State with that week 7 visit is going to be able to gain a lot of ground still in this top 3 stage. So I think it's now a perfect time to, like, kind of prepare for that. Especially if I can leapfrog them. We're going to double up here. We already have a complimentary visit for Bullock, who are in the battle. For Mr. Robert, we're going to go down and we will hit him with, the swamp atmosphere right away. I think now would be the perfect time, even if you're not kind of embracing the meta and going off meta and want to use visits. I think now, just when you have hours, is the perfect time to throw visits, especially when you can leapfrog the earliest visit that your competing school has, like we did right now. Well, actually, didn't see we had another little recruiting battle with the U again, and we're going to leapfrog them again with that week 6 visit, which I think is going to be crucial and critical in us getting the signature of both Potts and Bullock. And I guess as far as winning and losing on a visit, here's going to be an interesting scenario to see how it plays out. Ezekiel Pike, the 5-star, it's close, but he has that week 7 visit with Florida State. There is a chance. The closest I can bring him in is week 8. I probably should have maybe prepare this a little bit better. We can bring him in even with the competitive visit with Titus Brent. I think let's bring him in. Let's sell him on the A+. But there's a chance you know, kind of downselling how important visits are. This could be one where, because we kind of fell asleep at the wheel a little bit in Florida State with this close of a competition, maybe we can get a recruiting battle, which would be nice, but they may be able to steal away because they were able to get that early visit. All right, nice. We're still cleaning up. We got Zach Williams, the A+. Wow, look at that, dude. Didn't even matter. We lose 0-2, knocked out our first 2 recruiting battles against the U. They got that NIL money. I mean, I couldn't do anything. I had the max hours out. I brought him in for the early visit. Damn, ruthless. I would say my only argument with how this went down is, like, I don't necessarily know if I learned what I did wrong there. Like, was it just written in the stars that at the end of the day, these guys want to go? Like, my hours were maxed out at 50. Like, the only thing that would make sense would be if you looked at Miami and they can allocate more than 50 hours on a player. And if they weren't at their ceiling and they decided to go up to 75, for an example, like, I just can't compete with that with the way that Billy Napier is built right now in game. Man, oh man. I mean, ruthless. That's all you could say. Jesus. Thought those were locks. College Football 26, recruiting. More difficult. Boom, let's go. Another 5-star. Hell yeah. Titus Brent. Let's just run it up with another 5-star. Now, the only other big notable kind of change and improvement to recruiting from last year's game to this year's game is how they kind of show off what Sway actually does. And we just never really had the opportunity to present itself here with Florida. But in my transfer portal breakdown video, I had a perfect scenario to show how Sway works. So I'm going to throw it in right here for you guys to kind of get a good understanding. All right, let's have a little bit of fun here. We're going to be able to Sway. Looking at Leonard Moore, his ideal pitch is going to be the clutch. He likes stability, he likes playing style, and playing time. We do not want anything to do with that D grade in coach stability. So let's see if we can get a little Sway action, because we absolutely check the box for playing style and playing time. Honestly, this is like the perfect example, and it might not work at the end of the day, but the perfect example of how Sway can work in this game. Because it tells me that if I have at least 2 check marks, the success rate is get a hit as part of the proposed pitch. So this is the meta. This is what Leonard Moore is looking for. We don't want to have coach stability. But if we go down here just a little bit to clocked in, it is going to hit playing style and playing time, which are his 2 big fits. And then we're going to be able to throw in an A- of pro potential. Now, it's not a perfect flip. It's not like I'm being able to flip this to 3 A+, but this is going to give us a much bigger advantage. It is the perfect opportunity to use Sway. So there you go, fellas. That is my early recruiting guide for College Football 26. Hopefully, it is a way that helps you guys figure out, especially if you're a new player or an old player, universal recruiting tips that regardless of what dynasty you're doing, being a cupcake 1-star or taking over your favorite team as a 4 or 5-star, you're going to be able to go out there with a level of confidence to compete, whether you're competing against the CPU or you're competing against your buddies in a multi-user league. You're going to be able to hold your own in recruiting and hopefully find yourselves some 5-star gems with the elite dev trait. So that'll do it for me today, guys. Thank you very much. If you learned something from today's video and it is your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Old C4 here is going into year 15 on the football YouTube world. And hey, why not this year? Why not C4? Huh? Why not this year be the year? Strap the rock to my back and let's freaking go. Whereas always, we're trying to fight the YouTube robots. So if it is your first time and you want to help out the channel, look for a little like on the video. Maybe leave a comment about something that you are looking forward to. What is your favorite change and improvement to the recruiting cycle from College Football 25-26? Let me know in the comment section below. And plenty of content coming your way. I have a bunch of guides dropping. We're going to have a main channel Dynasty series. We're going to have Dynasty rebuilds dropping left, right, and center. Buckle up. It is going to be an absolute banger of a time. But until that time, it is your boy C4 saying peace out. Love ya. Have a good one.